If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Tuesday marked the end of a grueling and consequential primary season in Missouri. And after months of biting attacks and millions upon millions upon millions of dollars worth of ads, we're finally getting a clearer sense of some of the big statewide and congressional races in November. Perhaps the biggest news of the night was in St. Louis's 1st Congressional District. St. Louis County Prosecutor Wesley Bell ousted Congresswoman Cori Bush by about 6 percentage points. The Democratic primary was one of the most expensive in the history of the country and one of the more contentious primaries in recent St. Louis history. Bell said to his supporters last night in St. Louis that his win was a victory for more collaborative legislating.
We're going to watch the way we navigate on all types of media, social media and otherwise, because it's so important that we talk to one another, that we see each other, that we recognize that these issues they're not the hardest things in the world, but we got to listen to one another.
Meanwhile, Missouri Republicans and Democrats also picked their candidates for some critical statewide contests. Democrat Lucas Kunce will take on GOP U.S. Senator Josh Hawley, and Republican Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe will square off against Democratic House Minority Leader Crystal Quade in the race to succeed Governor Mike Parson. We have a lot to sort through, and joining us now in studio is Anita Manion, a political science professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Anita, thank you so much, and welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the Bell-Bush contest. Were you surprised by the results last night?
I have to say I wasn't particularly surprised because the polling had Bell in the lead for quite some time, and recent polling literally had that 6-point margin. So it was sort of in the cards, but definitely an upset and a lot of hurt from Cori Bush and her supporters last night and today.
There was a lot of commentary about how Bush's criticism of Israel played a major role in the dynamics of the campaign. Groups like the United Democracy Project, the political wing of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, I think spent about $9 million to boost Bell. There were other groups that spent to attack Bush and to boost Bell. And while neither Bell nor his allied groups mentioned Israel much in their ads, he did allude to it in his victory speech.
And we also have to make certain that we recognize that the world is a dangerous place. Yes, it is. And our national security interests are something that we have to take seriously. That's true. Yeah. Our words also matter with respect to the world stage.
That is Wesley Bell, the Democratic nominee for the 1st Congressional District. Anita, how critical of a role do you think that these pro-Israel groups played in Bush's downfall?
Oh, it's definitely crucial. Just if you live in District 1 like me, you were getting multiple mailers today, right? All of us saw the ads that were running. And as you said, they weren't really talking about Israel. They were instead attacking Congresswoman Bush's record, that she didn't support the infrastructure bill, was she present for votes, things like that. And I think it did raise questions in a lot of voters' minds.
When I was at the Bush watch party last night, and from talking with some of the folks there, a lot of reaction was they felt that groups like AIPAC bought this seat and bought this race. To play devil's advocate, like a lot of politically active groups get involved for a lot of different reasons, but it seems like groups like AIPAC are very controversial in Democratic politics. What do you kind of make of that type of argument?
I think you're right that certain groups are demonized more than others. The NRA would be another one that people are often criticized for taking contributions. I think one of the reason that the narrative that, this race was bought is because a similar action happened in New York where Jamal Bowman was also primaried and his opponent was funded by the same groups. And he also lost that race.
So one of the differences between the Bowman race and this one is the 1st Congressional District is a plurality African-American district. And one of the things I said was Bell needed to win African-American votes that had voted for Bush in order to prevail. And I don't have ward-by-ward data in the city, but we do have precinct results in St. Louis County, which Bell won by a sizable margin. And what's really striking to me is that Bell won every township except Norwood and Northwest townships. So that means that he did capture a significant amount of African-American support to go along with big margins in largely white or integrated townships. Does this mean the ad campaign may have been successful at turning black voters against Bush?
Yeah, I think the ad campaign was successful in that in some ways. And also, Wesley Bell was out there with a ground game. So Cori Bush notoriously has really fervent grassroots supporters, but Wesley Bell was out there consistently holding events, door knocking, and also had a very well organized campaign that helped with that.
And I think what's notable about this result is, and this is both from national polling and from me talking with African-American voters and political leaders, Israel is not a reason why black voters vote for or against a candidate. I heard that from like 99% of the African-Americans I spoke to. But it seems that the message highlighting the divergence of Bush from President Biden's agenda, especially on the infrastructure bill, may have struck a chord with not just black voters, but like white voters too. Like, what do you make of that hypothesis?
Yeah, I think that there's some truth to that. And I suspect, we don't have the data yet to prove this, but that the divides might have been more along age lines rather than racial lines, with younger voters seemingly more interested in that issue and more supportive of Cori Bush, and older voters, whether they're black or white, seemingly more supportive of Wesley Bell.
I'd like to invite our listeners into the conversation. If you have a question or comment about the 2024 Missouri primary, give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL on air or email us at talk@stlpr.org. So I mentioned I was at Bush's watch party last night, and the best way I could describe her concession speech was defiant. She said she had no regrets about speaking out against Israel's military invasion of Gaza and for Palestinian self-determination.
Let's talk about what it really is. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached as much as I love my job. But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they be afraid.
That is Congresswoman Cori Bush speaking to her supporters after she was defeated by Wesley Bell. From listening to Bush, it doesn't seem like she's planning on going away anytime soon, but I think that it's an open question about whether she'll be able to make a comeback in 2026. Could it also open the door for other St. Louis elected officials besides Bush to challenge Bell, given that Bell didn't win this race by an overwhelming margin?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'm curious to see what Cori Bush does next. Is she going to come back and fight for the seat, or maybe seek another position? It's really interesting, I think, to think that this seat was held by someone with the last name of Clay from 1969 to 2021, which is epic, until Cori Bush unseated Lacey Clay. And now we have our second, soon to be our second different congressperson elected from that district.
We say soon to be because there's still a general election, but the 1st Congressional District is so Democratic that it's almost a formality that Bell will make it across the finish line. You mentioned former Congressmen Clays, Bill Clay and Lacey Clay. One of the notable things, we talk often about like who is supporting whom and like which labor unions were supporting Bush or Bell. What was noticeable to me were there were a number of black elected officials that were connected to Clay that were neutral in this race. People like Senator Brian Williams, Senator Carla May, State Representative Kevin Windham Jr. And that spoke volumes to me because I don't think any of those people are enamored with Cori Bush, but they didn't really go out of their way to help Wesley Bell. Is that maybe a sign that like even people who are not fans of Cori Bush are not completely sold on Wesley Bell as a political figure representing the 1st District.
Well, that's one explanation. I think another is sometimes people want to keep their powder dry when they don't know who's going to win the race. And so if the Congresswoman, as an incumbent, was going to retain her seat, often people don't like to attack incumbents. And so that might also just be a little bit of strategy on their part.
And also the fact that Wesley Bell got into the Senate race when Carla May was getting in, I don't think made her very happy. And I know Senator Williams was thinking about running against Cori Bush, but Wesley Bell outflanked him as well. So that there could have been some hurt feelings there to some extent.
Yeah, I think this campaign did lead to a lot of hurt feelings and divisiveness within the local Democratic Party. So that's something they're going to figure out how to unite and heal after this.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll bring on St. Louis Public Radio's Sarah Kellogg, and she will join the conversation about yesterday's primary results. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. Welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. University of Missouri-St. Louis political science professor Anita Manion is still in studio with us discussing yesterday's primary results. And joining us now is Sarah Kellogg, who covers all things state government and state politics for St. Louis Public Radio. Sarah, we made it. We're here.
We did it. Good to be here, Jason.
What was your reaction and takeaway to Wesley Bell defeating Cori Bush?
I think that it shows what we were talking about, the idea of if Cori Bush, won enough of St. Louis City and the county, then with black voters especially, that she would probably sail to re-election. That wasn't the result. Honestly, I was surprised by this result. So I think that it definitely marks a shakeup and kind of a mark against baby progressives trying to run in St. Louis right now.
I'll throw this question up to both Anita and Sarah. It is not lost on me that this race took place a few days before the 10th anniversary of a Ferguson police officer shooting and killing Michael Brown, because Bush, Bell, and the third candidate, former state senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal, were all major political figures who either participated in the protest movement or, in the case of Bush and Bell, won election afterward. What do you think it means that this result occurred so close to the anniversary, and how do you think that kind of changes how we think about the political impact of Ferguson? Anita, I'll throw this to you.
Yeah, it wasn't very long ago, 6 years ago, that we were covering a surprise primary upset that Wesley Bell won, a primary election unseating a longtime Democrat there as well. And so he was this insurgent out of Ferguson, as was Cori Bush as an activist. And I think that is one reason that Wesley Bell deciding to challenge Cori Bush was upsetting to a lot of her supporters, who probably in the past voted for both of them and supported both of them.
We actually got a tweet from Annie Rice, STL, who is a former alderwoman. The weight of this election as we approach 10 years since Mike was murdered is so heavy. Sending love for all for whom this isn't easy. I guess my only other question on this point is, Michael Brown Sr. did actually get involved in this race. He cut a very memorable ad for Cori Bush, primarily on the fact that Bell did not end up charging Darren Wilson with a crime. Bell had said that there wasn't enough evidence to do so, and he knew it was a hard pill to swallow. What do you think Bell will, I'll throw this to Anita again. What do you think Bell is going to need to do to build bridges with some of the people that may have supported him in 2018, but may be deeply lacking trust with him right now based off this race?
Yeah, I think those Bush supporters and those folks who really connect with the activism see her as uncompromising, and that's what they like about her. And they see that in accepting these funds and challenging Bush, that Bell has compromised in their view. And so I think he's going to have to go a long way to build bridges to try to reestablish those bonds. And honestly, I'm not sure how possible that is with the hurt a lot of people are feeling.
Before we move on to state-based, statewide races, The other major Democratic primary, if you even want to call it major, was between Democrat Lucas Kunce and State Senator Carla May. That is no shade towards Senator May, who's my state senator and who I like quite a bit, but she had raised so little money compared to Kunce that this race was never in doubt. Kunce was able to bounce back from a difficult 2024. Sarah, you and I covered 2022 where Kunce fell short to Trudy Bush Valentine. I don't think this was surprising, but how do you think he squares up against GOP Senator Josh Hawley going into November?
I think this race is about to, we talked about how Kunce and May, they seem to like each other and respect each other. So it was a pretty nice primary. I think that is about to change drastically. We already saw Senator Hawley congratulate Kunce and immediately challenge him to a debate during the state fair next week after the ham breakfast, which I will be there. But it just seems like this is about to get a lot nastier. And I think it squares up as I guess kind of not two sides of the same coin, obviously, but I think that their rhetoric is going to be similar. So I think it's just going to be a really nasty race.
And Kunce was able to win this thanks to a huge financial advantage as well as support from a slew of labor unions. Hawley is also trying to court organized labor in a lot of different ways, including visiting picketing Teamsters. I think the biggest question here is whether this race will be competitive, and I think polling hasn't really shown quite yet. But Anita, no national prognosticator sees this contest as anything other than safe for Republicans. How could that possibly change so Kunce has a shot of actually winning this race?
Yeah, our last Senate race, the Republican Schmidt won 55% to 42% for Trudy Bush Valentine. That's a large gap if we look at that to overcome. But I think that Lucas Kunce would say he is a stronger candidate than Trudy Bush Valentine, and that Josh Hawley has some more flaws, maybe at this point, connections to January 6th and other issues that Kunce will try to exploit. And I think Democrats, although they haven't won statewide office since 2018 in Missouri, have this glimmer of hope that abortion initiative, maybe some enthusiasm for the top of the ticket could bring more progressive voters out this cycle.
All right, Sarah, let's talk about the gubernatorial primaries. I'm using that plurally. Plurally is not a word, but, I'm tired.
It's okay,
morning.
Jason. We're all tired.
So Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe emerged victorious from a three-way primary with Senator Bill Eigel placing second and Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft placing a distant third. Sarah, you were at the Kehoe extravaganza last night. Did this result surprise you at all?
It didn't. And also considering how many other media people were there with me, I don't think it surprised a lot of people. I know that in the beginning, he wasn't leading the polls. I think that was Ashcroft. I think a lot of that was due to name recognition. But as the campaign went by, as he was able to get his message out, as he was able to spend the lot of money that he had raised, I think that his profile was raising and he was winning over a lot of voters. So this was not a surprising result, at least for me at all.
I think the most surprising thing about this outcome was the person who got second place, which is Senator Eigel. He got 32% of the vote. He performed way better than Ashcroft, even though Ashcroft had more money and, as you mentioned, Sarah, better name recognition. Why do you, Sarah, I'll throw this to Sarah first. Why do you think Eigel was able to do pretty well, even though he was lesser known, arguably, than Secretary Ashcroft?
I do want to say, at least according to me looking at the latest July finance reports, that Eigel actually had a little bit more money than Ashcroft, but they were pretty comparable. I think that Eigel being truly a far-right conservative disruptor, which he showed in his record. Anita and I have talked about this, but, being far-right and showing himself to be an obstructor and really pushing against leadership in a way that kind of led to dysfunction, I think resonated with people. I think that ultimately we can't discount, how conservative Missouri is at times, especially when it comes to who they're putting into office. And I think that resonated with a lot of people, whereas with Ashcroft, if he can try to say, I'm an outsider, well, he's Secretary of State and he has the name Ashcroft. So I think that didn't resonate as well with people. I think it's less of a reflection on Eigel, which I do think absolutely overperformed than people thought, but kind of more a reflection on Ashcroft.
I completely agree. I wasn't surprised the Kehoe won, but was surprised at how poorly Ashcroft performed and how well Eigel performed. I think Eigel out-MAGA'd Ashcroft, and, Kehoe sort of had that more establishment lane. So the more right-wing vote was split between between Eigel and Ashcroft, and Eigel seemed to do better with that group.
Well, speaking of Kehoe, within the last hour, I had a chance to talk with the Democratic and Republican nominees for Missouri governor. We'll hear from House Minority Leader Crystal Quade in just a moment. But first, let's hear from Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. I first asked him if he thought he was able to emerge victorious because he ran a more effective campaign than his two main opponents.
Well, obviously Missourians thought that, but based on how they voted. And our team did a really good job of making sure we remembered how important the grassroots was, how important it is to have somebody say, I'm going to tell 2 or 3 of my friends at dinner tonight about Mike Kehoe, how important those contacts are. And we just never wanted to let go of not only trying to make sure we're out there in the mass media where you have to be if you're in a campaign, but also trying to get the best ground game as we could. I think our endorsed organizations did a wonderful job of helping us with that, and I believe that made a big difference in the campaign.
So now you go into the general election against Democrat Crystal Quade, who's the House Minority Leader. It's very likely that you two will be running against each other with a measure to legalize abortion on the ballot, which could significantly increase Democratic turnout compared to 2016 and 2020. How prepared are you to enter the general election season where the political dynamics may be very different compared to previous good Republican election years?
Well, we'll be very prepared because I believe the people who are interested in protecting innocent life will show up as well. And we will do everything we can to make sure Missourians understand how important it is to protect innocent life, come out and defeat that amendment should it make it to the ballot, which I think we all assume it will. And so we'll motivate the pro-life crowd as well. And I believe that will, Missourians are a pro-life state, and we've seen that time and time again. And we're hopeful that we can make sure those folks show up in November to defeat that initiative.
Both Senator Eigel and Secretary of State Ashcroft, and this was not a surprise to me, their main source of attack against you was that you were not conservative enough for the Republican electorate. Now, obviously, you won, but you still did not get a majority, which is, again, not surprising given that you had 2 very well-funded candidates. What message would you send to supporters of Eigel and Ashcroft who still have questions about whether you are conservative enough for them, and make sure that you have their support going into the general election cycle?
Well, that strategy backfired on him when Donald J. Trump endorsed me. And I know he endorsed all 3 candidates, but by endorsing Mike Kehoe, what Donald J. Trump said is, I like a conservative small businessman. I talked to President Trump personally last night. He was very excited, and Eigel and Ashcroft kept saying that, but Trump said, no, Kehoe's, not some crazy liberal. So they were essentially saying Donald Trump was wrong. I think that probably didn't work out so well.
When I talked with you, I believe in 2023, I asked you about the possibility of supporting anti-discrimination laws against the LGBTQ community. And you said that you would certainly consider it, though you were not really ready to say, yes or no. What was interesting was, Eigel especially really attacked you hard for making those comments to me. And it obviously didn't matter to Republican primary voters. Now, do I need to say this paragraph here before we go into Quade? Republicans need to reach out to the LGBTQ community more, especially since there could be gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Missourians who may have conservative viewpoints but may be repelled by the party's hostility toward that community.
Look, you and I have talked about this several times, and you're right. My personal views are probably very different than maybe what some of that community would like me to have. But we also have to think about who is the future of our party. And if you have conservatives within that group who would like to identify as a conservative, and you're not recognizing that, you're not really looking at what the future looks like. So as I've told you many times, I'm not the judge or the jury. I have personal feelings on that, but I'm also willing to try to figure out what does it take to recognize the conservative voice within those groups of people and listen to them.
My final question for you is really about how you got here. You gave me a copy of your autobiography when you came to record your segment on the Politically Speaking Hour in St. Louis on the Air. I read the whole thing. I love the part about you driving a blimp. I think you're probably the only governor who has driven a blimp before. But it also talks about how you really came from really difficult circumstances where your father abandoned your family when you were 1. You certainly were not a rich person growing up. What does it mean to you that you're on the potentially being on the precipice of being governor, given all the adversity you had to get through to get to this point?
Well, number one, thank you for reading the book. I'm glad it didn't put you to sleep. You were the first person, by the way, I gave a book to, as I recall.
I'm very flattered by that, by the way, and that will clearly elicit easier questions going forward. But continue.
Well, I'm ready to answer whatever questions you want to ask me, Jason, because I think you do a great job for your listeners. I would tell you it's an incredibly emotional, humbling experience because I reflect on that all the time. The guy I grew up with there in St. Louis, Dave Sinclair, always said, never forget your roots. And I never try to forget the neighborhood that I came from, the family members and neighbors that supported our family with food and clothes and, things when we needed help. And it's a great country, and we need to make sure that the people in Missouri understand that hope is a reality that you can shoot for. Anything you want to do, and if you want to work hard enough and it's in your heart and you want to achieve it, it's possible. And I'd like to represent that group of people who think there's no hope left, that there's just absolutely, we're at wit's end. You got to keep fighting. And if you're a fighter in this country and in this state, and you believe in yourself and the folks that you're around, you can go from North St. Louis City with no father to being the Republican nominee for governor. I think it's just incredible, and only in this country does that happen.
That's Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. He bested State Senator Bill Eigel and Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, and is the GOP nominee for governor. Within the last hour, I also spoke with House Minority Leader Crystal Quade, who beat businessman Mike Hamra for the Democratic nomination for governor. I asked Quade for her reaction to yesterday's win.
This is a great showcase that money doesn't buy everything in politics. It's so important to show up and, as you mentioned, Jason, in every corner of the state and introduce yourself to folks and hear what Missourians want out of their state government. And that's exactly what we did, and that's how we won this race.
You will be squaring off against Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe, who defeated Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft and State Senator Bill Eigel. How do you think that you square up against Kehoe, who managed to win with a very well-funded and very well-organized campaign against 2 other candidates who had well-funded and well-organized campaigns?
Yeah, we're looking at the general election exactly how we've looked at the primary race and every other race in between. We know we're going to be outspent. That's just the reality of how Missouri is. But again, it's about showing up and listening to folks. Every corner of the state I went to, I heard from Missourians from all political spectrums that they were frustrated with, all the negative and partisan attack ads that the Republicans were doing, but also just how the state of Missouri currently is. The fact that we are, last in our teacher pay and our public education systems, that our roads and bridges are crumbling, that we have politicians in our doctors' offices making decisions. There's so many issues that cross partisan politics right now that people are frustrated by. And so, regardless of who won the Republican nomination, we are going to run this race the exact same way.
It is very likely that you will be running alongside a ballot initiative to legalize abortion. When we were talking with Lieutenant Governor Kehoe, he's expecting Missourians who oppose abortion rights to come out, just as I'm sure Democrats are hoping abortion rights supporters come to the polls. How do you think that this is going to affect this contest, and could it bring a different type of dynamic to the electorate than 2016 or 2020, which were pretty good Republican years overall?
Yeah, we absolutely know that this ballot initiative is going to make an impact in November. We can look to our neighboring red states of Kansas and Kentucky, where they were able to stop abortion bans and then elect Democratic governors. The reality is that Missourians don't want politicians telling them what to do. And folks may not totally be aligned on this issue, but they're aligned on the fact that they want that personal freedom and want, again, politicians out of their doctor's offices. And so we absolutely know that folks are going to turn out and vote for this. We know that initiative is going to pass, and we know it's going to impact the governor's race as well.
I asked a similar question to Kehoe, but you mentioned in your ads that you came from very humble origins. And I want you to reflect for a moment on the fact that you may be on the precipice of becoming governor based off where you started in your life, because that does seem to be a bit of a commonality between you two. But I'd like to give you this moment to maybe think about how you got to this point in your political career based on where you started from.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very humbling and overwhelming experience to come from the type of background I did. For folks who don't know, I grew up in rural Southwest Missouri, and my mom was a waitress, and my stepfather worked in a factory, drove almost an hour to get there every day. And I'm the very first to graduate high school and then worked my way through college as a social worker. And, what it shows me, both looking at, for both myself and the lieutenant governor, is that Missourians want leaders who understand what they're going through. It is so vital to have a leader who knows the struggle of, do I pay my mortgage or my utility bill right now, or how important it is to find affordable and safe childcare and how difficult that is. And I, when we look at this race and every other race I've had before that, it really is a testament to being able to understand where regular folks are and prioritizing that instead of making our state government focused on the wealthiest in Missouri or give tax cuts to these corporations. We need to be investing in Missourians and the things that impact them every day. And it's really an honor to have traveled this journey of mine and make it this far and be able to have this conversation.
That's House Minority Leader Crystal Quade, who is the Democratic nominee for Missouri governor. We need to take a quick break, but after that, we will return with more analysis and insight about Tuesday's primary election. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. Welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. We asked for callers today, and we happen to have a very notable caller on the line. He is St. Louis County Prosecutor Wesley Bell, the winner of the nationally watched 1st Congressional District Democratic primary. Prosecutor Bell, welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Hey, always a pleasure to be on.
So one of the things I want to ask you about is the results in St. Louis County. When we talked, when you came on the show, I mentioned how important it was for you to gain a lot of ground with the African Americans in the district. And it seems, unless I did the Excel files completely wrong, and it's possible because I'm exhausted right now, you won every township except 2, and those 2 that you lost, you didn't lose by that much, which means that you were successful at getting significant African American support for your campaign. What do you attribute that to?
I think first and foremost, folks in this district, they want results, and folks in this district know what they're going to get from me. As the Ferguson City Councilman, we work to bring community policing, court reforms, body cameras for every single police officer. As county prosecutor, we aggressively expanded treatment programs. We created the first of its kind conviction integrity unit in St. Louis County. And so folks know that that I'm going to get things done, and that's exactly what they can expect from me as the next congressman.
This was a very contentious race between you and Congresswoman Bush, as well as your supporters and her supporters. How do you bridge some of the schisms that have emerged over these past few months? Because you've talked a lot about collaboration and cooperation and talking with people that may not have your worldview or your ideology, but what is going to be your strategy to get people that didn't vote for you to believe and trust in you going forward?
We've had these same challenges when I ran for city council in Ferguson, and it was a very contentious time. And I literally, at times, stood in between police and protesters to help calm tensions. And I recognized then that the only way to move Ferguson and the region forward was to work together, and we were able to do that. It took a lot of tough conversations and uncomfortable conversations, but we worked together to get that done. As county prosecutor, this is a place with 88 municipalities and 55 police departments. You can't get anything done without working together. And I came in after a 30-year incumbent, so a lot of folks didn't know me. But we got to work to building those relationships. And Jason, what I'll say is there's no workaround or shortcut to building relationships. You got to sit down and have the conversations and have that mindset that you are looking for that common ground. And that's exactly what I'm going to do as the next congressman. We're going to reach out to not only the stakeholders and elected officials that supported us, but also the ones who didn't support us. Because at the end of the day, if our goal is to have a better and safer and more prosperous, vibrant St. Louis, then that means we all got to work together to do that. And that's exactly what I intend to do. That's what I've done. And that's what you can expect from me as the congressman.
One more important question before we let you go. This was one of the most expensive primaries in the United States history. There were a number of groups that I would classify as pro-Israel groups that spent a lot of money on your behalf. Frankly, there's a lot of people who supported Cori Bush who really were uncomfortable with that, and I think have a lot of anger and distrust to you because you benefited from that, even though that's third-party groups. It's not your campaign. What would you say to those people who were not enthused or uncomfortable with how much money was spent in this Democratic primary?
Well, first and foremost, I believe other than the Dobbs decision, Citizens United is one of the worst decisions that the Supreme Court has handed down in recent years. I do believe that there's too much money in politics, and I do believe in campaign finance reform. But that said, this is the sandbox we play in, and it is what it is at this point in time. That said, there were ads coming for and against, and sitting out on the polls all day, I don't think there was one voter who wasn't aware of my positions as well as the Congresswoman's positions, and seeing through the ads and things of that nature. So the messages and the campaign strategies were clear, and the Congresswoman focused on more of a divisive and a campaign that was focused on, in my opinion, division. And our campaign was more focused on a vision for this region of how to move this region forward, how to ensure that Roe versus Wade is codified and women enjoy the 50 years of rights over autonomy over their bodies, public safety and common sense gun safety laws. You know, the number one killer of young black boys in this region now is gun violence, and that's not okay with me. We're losing population, and so we need to attract businesses and industries back to this region because I do believe this region is a sleeping giant, and it's time we wake it up.
Prosecutor Bell, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on your big win yesterday.
Thank you so much for having me, as always.
Anita, what did you make of my conversation with Bell?
Oh, well, let's see. You know, I think he is trying to craft a narrative. I think a lot of what he said there is what he was saying in his campaign about his vision for St. Louis, and he sees himself as a uniting candidate, even though a lot of people found his decision to challenge Cori Bush to be divisive.
Well, we have another victorious congressional candidate on the line. I asked for callers, and I'm just getting winners, so to speak. And that is former State Senator Bob Onder. He ran in the 3rd Congressional District in a contest to succeed Blaine Luetkemeyer, who is retiring. And this race was also very expensive and contentious. And Bob, how are you doing today after this big win?
Well, Jason, I'm doing very well. I'm tired, but I feel very honored that the voters of the 3rd Congressional District have chosen me as the Republican nominee for November. We're feeling really good. A lot of phone calls to be returned and a lot of phone calls to be made thanking the many people who helped me with that victory last night.
So you were actually the only Missouri candidate who got a singular endorsement from Donald Trump. We've talked before about how, I guess, the governor's race, he endorsed 3 people, and the attorney general's race, he endorsed 2, and the lieutenant governor's race, he endorsed 2. How much do you think Trump's endorsement helped you beat former state senator Kurt Schaefer, who Luetkemeyer was supporting in this contest?
Well, yeah, I think it helped a lot. I don't think there's any endorsement in American politics, maybe in the history of American politics, that can be more impactful than the endorsement of President Trump. I've been with President Trump for a long time. I was a delegate of his back in 2016, all the way through going up to Iowa as a surrogate for him during the caucuses this year. But I think really the President Trump's endorsement by itself, I don't know, makes as much difference as the fact that it was a recognition that I was the America First conservative in my race. A theme that was already part of my campaign, and when all the money was being spent and all the attack ads were being spent, President Trump gave me, if you will, third-party credibility that helped drive home the message and lead to our victory last night.
This was your second run for Congress as you took part in the legendary 9th Congressional District race in 2008, which you and I talk about all the time because we both went through it together.
Yes.
You lost to Blaine Luetkemeyer in that primary. As I mentioned, he emphatically did not support you. In fact, he spent at least $600,000 to a political action committee attacking you. What do you make of the fact that the person you were trying to replace was so dead set against you taking his seat?
Yeah. It's funny after that loss in 2008 to Congressman Luetkemeyer. I've supported him. I've gone to his fundraisers. I've contributed to campaigns. I've endorsed him introduced him at Lincoln Days events. I think Congressman Luetkemeyer, I believe, thought that seat should be occupied by a candidate from Central Missouri, and I understand that. But look, I'm going to be a congressman for the entire district, and for that matter, our entire region, our entire state. So, I think I'll be spending a lot of time in Central Missouri, gaining the support and the trust of the people who supported my opponent yesterday, and hopefully with time, Congressman Luetkemeyer and I will work together for a smooth transition of his congressional office so that I can be of the best possible service to the folks of our district.
One more question before I let you go. If you win in November, you'll be entering a U.S. House that's been beset by GOP infighting and gridlock. There's no guarantee Republicans will keep the majority. Given that you ran on your reputation of being combative and even with GOP leadership, how realistic is it that you'll be able to make a tangible difference on the issues that you care about?
Yeah, I think I'll make a difference. I wouldn't have run if I didn't think I could make a difference. And look, there is a time. There's a time to fight, and there's a time to work together. I believe that if the voters of the United States entrust us Republicans with the White House, with the House, with the Senate, we will have a historic opportunity to make our country a better place, to take our country back. And, we Republicans will have to work together, hopefully with the help of some common sense Democrats, to do that, because we will be given an opportunity to turn away from the days of the Biden-Harris administration and turn our country back to a more prosperous, secure, strong place. And again, that will take teamwork, and I will be a member of the team.
Former Senator Bob Onder is the Republican nominee for Missouri's 3rd Congressional District. Dr. Onder, thank you for joining us, and congratulations on your win.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be on.
Sarah, we both have covered Onder when he was in the Missouri Senate. What do you make of what occurred yesterday, given that are you in the 3rd District? Do you live there, or do you live in the 4th? Anita, we're having some technical problems,
Sure.
But what do you think of Onder's win yesterday?
Yeah, I think his tone on the call right now was interesting. Maybe a pivot towards the general election, because he talked about being a team player and working with common sense Democrats, which was not his MO in the Missouri state legislature, but perhaps that's his plan as he moves on to Congress.
We have Sarah Kellogg back. What was kind of your reaction to Onder winning, given that he will represent your neck of the woods in central Missouri?
I will say I do represent, I think I'm in the 4th. There's a split between the city, basically, and I think I'm in that district. So I won't be represented by him if he wins in November. But I think, you guys talked about it at the interview. I think the Trump endorsement was a really big boon for him. I think part of it is because with a lot of his Trump's endorsements with Missouri politics, he endorsed all 3 gubernatorial candidates. He also endorsed both Republicans in the AG race. And this was the one where he picked a candidate. He didn't kind of shore his bets by picking both. So I think that did make a really big difference for Onder.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and I do want to go over some of the other big results before we look forward. 2 of Governor Mike Parson's appointees, Attorney General Andrew Bailey and State Treasurer Vivek Malik, they won big on Tuesday. And also Secretary of State Denny Hoskins, state senator, will go up against State Representative Barbara Pfeiffer, a Democrat from St. Louis County. Lieutenant Governor David Wassinger, who is an attorney from St. Louis County, won a contested contest and will face State Representative Richard Brown. And Malik, by the way, will face Democrat Mark Osmak. So, Sarah, I'll go to you. What do you kind of expect to be the big thing to look for in the general election cycle once we get some sleep after this primary?
I do want to say, I think it's really interesting that all of Parsons' endorsed candidates won their race last night. So that would be Malik, that would be Bailey, and Kehoe. So I think it was very interesting to see kind of a more, not institution, but kind of continuous of who Parson wanted succeeding and possibly winning in November. I think that some things I'm going to look out for are what other outside factors might be affecting the general race. I know Missouri is primarily a red state now, so winning statewide election is an uphill battle for Democrats, but there could be, new factors, including Vice President Harris now being the top of the ticket for the Democrats, presumably, most likely. And then same thing with the possibility of the abortion issue possibly being on the ballot. So I'm curious to see how much that might affect voters down the line.
Anita, same question to you. What should Missourians look out for as November gets closer?
I agree with Sarah that it was a good night for Mike Parson. And in a way that makes us think that sort of the more establishment brand of Republican politics might be thriving in Missouri. But if you look at the gubernatorial primary, really Eigel and Ashcroft, who were running on the more firebrand side, combined got more than 50% of the vote. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if it is more, the conservative policies, but the more moderate tone like Kehoe, or if some of more of these firebrands tend to be what represents the Missouri Republican Party.
Yeah, and one other thing before I let you all go. It was not a good night for St. Louis County Executive Sam Page.
Correct.
He will only have one reliable ally on the St. Louis County Council, likely, and traditionally that has not been a good thing. So we'll have to see how he handles that going into 2025. Anita Manion is a University of Missouri St. Louis political science professor, and Sarah Kellogg is St. Louis Public Radio's State House and Politics reporter. Anita, Sarah, thank you for joining us after this amazing, historical, fabulous Missouri primary.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
The Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air is produced by Jason Rosenbaum, Alex Hoyer, Emily Woodbury, Danny Wysentowski, Maya Norfleet, and Elaine Cha. Audio engineering and sound design by Aaron Dorr. The politics editor is Fred Ehrlich, and our production intern is Roche Hemmings.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.